More broadly, when I saw just how destructive FTX's explosion was on the cryptocurrency ecosystem through the lens of trust, it didn't feel like it was going to be possible to recover. And so we did go ahead and shut the company down. Through the lens of does the universe have my back? Fast forward 3 more months after that, the AI ecosystem really lit on fire, and it became clear that I was receiving a somewhat violent ejection from the cryptocurrency ecosystem so that I could put all of my efforts into the AI ecosystem. So I now look back and feel and trust that the universe had my back, but I got to say at the time, it didn't feel that way.
It absolutely didn't. It absolutely didn't. It felt like we were working so hard to push that, boulder uphill only to have it come crashing down, effectively on top of us. Hey, Flourish or Fold podcast listeners, we have got such a treat for you today. I have my friend, my colleague, my mentor. I've also been his coach, Nick Sullivan, on today. And what a delight and an honor to sit down with Nick. He was the CEO of an incredible cryptocurrency company called Heart Rhythm. And Nick is going to talk about his journey as an entrepreneur, as a CEO. And if you've ever been in a moment where you've wondered whether you should stay or whether you should go, how you make a decision about whether or not you continue to face the challenges that you're in or whether you pivot in a new direction, you're going to love this conversation with Nick Sullivan. Welcome back to Flourish or Fold Stories of Resilience, where we have the opportunity to dive deeper, to take a look behind the curtain and talk to well-known people about their lesser well-known stories of resilience. And today I am so excited to have with me a dear friend, an amazing colleague, a mentor, someone who I look up to and have enjoyed so many incredible moments with, Nick Sullivan. Now, Nick is a technologist who has 20 plus years in and around Silicon Valley. He's a heart-led leader, and he's focused on the healthy intersection of humanity and technology. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Taryn. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. I'm so happy to have you on the show. We were talking a little bit before we hit record, and it is just so wonderful to get to have you with us on this podcast on Flourish or Fold. And even though I know a number of your stories and I know I'm going to learn some new things about you, I am so excited for this conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be great. You and I have had a lot of beautiful intersecting paths over the years, and this feels like a good full circle moment to wrap it all up and tell our story as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and slingshot forward into everything that comes next. So one of the things that came up in your bio that I was sharing with our audience is that you are a heart-led leader and you have focused on heart-led leadership. And like in concept, I'm like, yeah, that sounds really good. And then I think about what is that actually? So can you talk to us about how you think about creating, cultivating heart-led leadership in your own life and in the organizations that you've been in and have founded?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think in order for groups to thrive, the number one thing is people need to feel safe. Google famously did a study across all of their groups and organizations. And when they were about 14,000 employees, they looked at the effectiveness of different groups and cross-cut the data, and then dove deeply into what makes a successful, effective group within Google in terms of the management style. And the number one factor that stood out with the fairly deep analysis was the managers of those effective groups led with psychological safety as a core principle in how they run the team, build the team. And so I've spent a lot of energy in that area. There's some broader cultural ways of thinking about psychological safety in terms of but then there's also some specific implementations. One of the things that I do is look for the quietest voice in the room, and actually identify what's it going to take for them to be pulled into the conversation. How are we going to create the group culture so that there's not just one or two or three voices always dominating the group feel, and actually reward people for coming forward. You set that tone, and you start to see what happens when all voices are welcomed within the group. The other fascinating part about this study is that it correlates heavily with diversity. So that actually brings forward this interesting notion of how much of the effectiveness that we see with, quote, diverse groups is actually because of diversity, versus how much of the effectiveness of diversity efforts is a result of the psychological safety that the manager is creating, so that all voices are welcome, all cultures are welcome, all different viewpoints are welcome. It also encourages people to take risks. When people are in an environment where they're going to be rewarded for taking risks, when they're going to be celebrated for taking risks, there's been an incredible uplift I've seen, particularly with women who have been told that it's not okay to take risks through the cultural. I think typically there's the phrase "boys will be boys." But girls are supposed to follow the rules. There's a little bit of that culturally. I like to shatter that notion and specifically reward people for taking risks and breaking the rules. I've had women come to me that have worked with me that say the best thing that I've ever done for them was my belief in them. And kind of shattering the glass ceiling for them when they have that pigeonholed themselves at a certain level within an organization. And I say, no, that's not who you are. You're much better than that. So creating an environment of safety is one of the biggest elements for me of heart-centered and heart-led culture. I really love bringing love into business. It's been labeled as a bit of a dirty word by some people. You and I've worked together a lot. You've seen me discuss love and unconditional love a lot in business. It's such a powerful and driving force, and I'm ready to break the association or the correlation that some people have in business that love makes you soft, or love doesn't belong in business because it's an emotion. I read through Elon Musk's biography by Walter Isaacson the other day, and I was listening and learning about how Elon Musk tends to see empathy as a plight, and he actually hires managers that don't have empathy because he thinks it makes them make soft decisions. And I think that's just a terrible idea. We definitely need to be having empathy and love at the forefront of the ways that we manage and lead people.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful overview of how you think about being a heart-led leader, that it first and foremost comes from a foundation of psychological safety. You talked about the importance of love, and you also talked about uplifting the feminine, which I know from you has been deeply important as you have thought about the impact, the imprint that you're making both personally and professionally. And I really love how you use the word or the phrase shattering the glass ceiling, because sometimes the glass ceiling that we most need to shatter is the glass ceiling in our own minds. the glass ceiling of what we believe we're worthy enough to have or what we're capable of. And so when you have gone to people and said, I believe in you, or I see this for you, in effect, I think what you're describing is not only shattering the glass ceiling of what's possible for them in your organization, but also shattering the glass ceiling in their own minds and what they had previously believed they were capable of.
Yeah, I've got another story about that. One of the people that used to work for me, a woman, came to me and just was vulnerable and honest and shared that she found herself continually managing down expectations and setting her own bars for herself at 85%, where she knew that she would always check the box. She would always get 100% on the test. And I said, okay, well, we're going to flip that script. On your next performance review, I want you to come with 3 failures that you've had. And I specifically directed her to fail at something, to make sure that she was setting goals high enough for herself to not be sandbagging, because I wanted to see what she was actually capable of. And so the safety that I created for her to actually go out and intentionally fail wound up being one of the best up-levelings for her career.
It's amazing. I absolutely love that story. And something else in your bio that is really striking to me, and I'm sure it's striking to our listeners, is your focus on the healthy intersection of humanity and technology. Now, I can't imagine this is something as simple as, just making sure that we're not mindlessly scrolling through social media. But there is such an important dialogue, I think, even at the most basic level, about what is sort of the right intersectionality or the right relationship between humanity and technology. So could you talk a little bit about how you think about and how you're in exploration of the healthy intersection of humanity and technology?
Yeah, this is my favorite topic right now. So there's lots of stories in the media, and in our stories from Hollywood of the cold, dark dystopian future where the machines take us over, and in some ways those are important fear-driven stories to show us what to stay away from. But it's also important to hold the view of the good stories, so that we aren't just living out those cold, dark dystopian futures and live into something better. I'm a big believer in the sea of infinite universes, and I believe that the one that we collectively put the most conscious energy to is the one that will come into existence. And so I think that right now is the most important time in my career for us to bring heart into technology. AI is being built very fast, and it's being built by a bunch of good people, and it's also a huge lever. So in the hands of good people, AI is going to do wonderful things. In the hands of bad people, it's also going to do some potentially damaging things. And so, how do we, as a race, consciously decide to have the AI built in the right way? I've spent quite a bit of energy thinking through this. One of the notable challenges with AI design development is what's called the paperclip maximizer problem. And you can look up the full story, but the essence is if you give a machine a goal of, say, make as many paperclips as you can, it will create the factory that makes the paperclips. And then when it runs out of resources, it'll start to strip mine the planet for more resources to create more paperclips. And so soon, just because you gave it a singular goal of create as many paperclips as you can, it'll align everything toward that goal. And one of the big challenges in the AI research field is effectively there's no way that you can give a machine a singular goal and have it work out well, because you can't possibly understand all of the different offshoot circumstances that will go into the machine's thought process. And so basically the AI industry as a whole has given up on, you got to pick a goal. And so instead, I think the right approach is actually what humans do. And I use this approach a lot when I think about how to build AI systems, is trusting that 5 billion years of evolution that created our human brain got a few things right. And humans don't make singular decisions. We have a set of values. And then we make trade-offs on those values. We actually start to decide, well, this particular path has this value uplifted, but it conflicts with this one. But we take that all into consideration and we make a balanced view. So I think first we need to actually create a structure for the machines to have a broad value structure, and then do multivariate optimization across all those values to decide what's the best path forward, just like humans do. And then the critical values that we need to teach the machines are love and empathy. I believe that the machines will be smarter than us. It's just a matter of time. And so rather than try to control them, which I think is a bit of a lost cause, I don't trust the government to figure out how to regulate AI. AI is, or Bitcoin is just now starting to be effectively regulated, and it's 12 years after it was created.
So the government was right on top of that one.
I don't trust big tech companies to regulate themselves. There's great efforts out there by Tristan Harris and Azza, the creators of Social Dilemma. They're now creating the AI dilemma. I think that public education is very necessary. I bless what they're doing, but I don't think that in and of itself is going to be the source of the problem. What I think we need is to teach the machines love and empathy across a balanced value structure, where they effectively treat us as their favorite children, and make choices just like we would treat our children. I believe that's the right path, and I think we can do it.
That's amazing. I love that so much. And then I think also teaching technology about love and empathy, and then also teaching us as humans about how to use the technology in a way that we can draw boundaries for ourselves and effectively leverage that technology in a way that optimizes and maximizes our life, rather than feeling like it's a detractor.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
For all of you listening in to Flourish or Fold Stories of Resilience, I want to share with you an online course that we have on our website. We're going to go ahead and drop the website in our show notes, or you can go to www.resilience-leadership.com and check out our offerings. We've got an incredible course for you called Flourish, the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People. So if you love what you're learning about in this podcast, if you love these conversations on resilience, if you love hearing about how you can more effectively face the inevitable moments of challenge, change, and complexity, or the 3 C's as I call them, in your life, then go ahead and check out our online course, Flourish, the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People, because what you are going to find is a one-on-one tutorial with me around each of those 5 practices, as well as an introduction and a conclusion. We've got hours of content that is going to allow you to engage in direct coaching and learning with me on the 5 practices. Go ahead and check it out, and I hope you'll join us in our online course, Flourish, the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People. So you and I have gotten to wade through some, pretty gnarly challenges together, especially when we worked together at one of the companies that you had founded as CEO. And I actually included, I didn't identify you in the book because I didn't ask for your permission in advance of the publication date, but I tell a story in the book about a CEO that I'm working with who comes to me and says, Taryn, I'm a good person and I'm working really hard to do good things for humanity here. Why does this whole thing have to be so dang hard? And I go on in the book to talk about our conversation and this sort of misnomer that even if we are good people, even if we are wanting to make an incredibly important and beneficial contribution to the world, that still doesn't necessarily mean that the path is made clear for us. And so in that moment, you were in sort of a critical decision point around a challenge that you were facing. And I'd love for you to sort of unpack your leadership role inside of a company that you were running at the time, and some pretty challenging decisions that you made at two different points about whether or not to stay or go.
Yeah, it was quite the story. So quick and relevant background, Heart Rhythm was the name of the company, as in heart and algorithm. And it was on mission, a company centered around this idea of the healthy intersection of humanity and technology. And we were in the cryptocurrency space and building a crypto quant fund. And what was really special about us, though, was our broader mission. We were driving 50%, 50, of our performance fees to social impact projects. And the big, hairy, audacious goal for Heart Rhythm was to become the largest source of institutional capital flowing into good. And we were, as of April 2022, everything was going awesome. We had a really healthy set of employees that were aligned to our mission. There was a beautiful culture, feminine energy at all levels of the company, heart-centered mission, raising money from aligned capital, 80 million in assets under management with the company, growing 15% month over month, $350 million in the pipeline. Like we were doing it. This was after about 2 years of quite a bit of effort to get there. You were heavily involved in a big part of that. Thank you. And we hit the first catastrophe that really it ripped our roof off, which was being hit by the Terra Luna crisis. I'll let readers look it up if they want to, but short version, we had a 36% loss for all the investors in the fund, and for a fund that was promising 10 to 15% a year yield, that was effectively a mortal blow. That was it, and I had my first resilience touch point, and it's like, well, okay, this is, lesser people would give up, but I'm going to face this as a test that no, this is part of our story. We're going to continue. I rallied the troops. A couple of the mercenaries shook off, and we were left with the missionaries in the company, and we had a big pull ourselves. We were putting the roof back on. So I rebuilt the business. We relaunched the fund. I also started 2 other parallel mini businesses within the company that would drive in inventory. One was a lending product, and we had $26 million in new commitments coming into that over the next 3 months. And then we relaunched the platform as a Web3 platform, and we were ready to go fundraise for that deck. So we had the new fund, a new lending product, and a new Web3 version of the company, all built within 3.5 months, and we're ready to go. And then Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX exploded that in November, effectively destroying the fundraising landscape within cryptocurrency. And so I was faced with, getting the roof ripped off twice within 4.5 months. And that was a tough one for me. And I think that's right when you and I had that conversation of like, gosh, why does this have to be so hard? Here I am trying to do this right. I'm checking every box I can imagine. And I expected the universe to have my back, quite frankly. I was like, well, if I'm doing it right, how come, why is there all this resistance? Why does this have to be so hard? And, so we did actually decide to close Heart Rhythm down, and this wound up being, in your words, a different path on the choice of productive perseverance. And it was interesting to have kind of the side by side of the first time. Yes, it was clear that the right decision was to push forward and treat it as a test and as part of the story. And then the second time, more broadly, when I saw just how destructive FTX's explosion was on the cryptocurrency ecosystem through the lens of trust, it didn't feel like it was going to be possible to recover. And so we did go ahead and shut the company down. Through the lens of does the universe have my back? Fast forward 3 more months after that, the AI ecosystem really lit on fire, and it became clear that I was receiving a somewhat violent ejection from the cryptocurrency ecosystem so that I could put all of my efforts into the AI ecosystem. So I now look back and feel and trust that the universe had my back, but I got to say at the time, it didn't feel that way.
It absolutely didn't. It absolutely didn't. It felt like we were working so hard to push that, boulder uphill only to have it, come crashing down, effectively on top of us. And, I think when we think about that practice of the 5 practices of highly resilient people of productive perseverance, so many people have asked themselves, I've asked myself, how do we sort of effectively navigate, this interplay, this tension between, when do we stay? When do we continue, on our path in the face of challenge? And when do we pivot in the face of diminishing returns? And, you and I were talking a little bit about this before. I think it's really hard to talk about that in theory. And I think hearing a story like what you shared around how the first time this happened, you looked at the ecosystem, you looked internally at yourself to see if you were up for this, if the team was up for this, to kind of keep going. And then the second time you looked at the ecosystem and said, I think the trust in the realm of cryptocurrency has been, eroded so significantly that we're not going to be able to fundraise, in this landscape. And, I think something striking that has happened in so many people's lives is like in that moment, it doesn't feel like the universe has our back. It does feel like a violent ejection where we're being pushed away from something that we love, something we desire, something we've invested so much time in creating. So can you say a little bit more, Nick, now kind of hindsight being 2020 in retrospect, how that perspective has shifted? Because you said now you do believe the universe has your back, but it's taken some time and perhaps some distance to be able to come to that new perspective. And I'm curious in your reflection what that journey has been like for you and how you've come to that conclusion.
Yeah, well, I will say too, there was definitely some time that I needed to pull away a little bit and emotionally recover, because heart rhythm, I poured my soul into it. I got really hurt, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to see the good or the light until I healed. And so there was actually an important few months there where I needed to pull away, process what had happened, and figure out why was this the path? And that was a question I kept asking myself, was like, why? What am I supposed to learn here? Why? Assuming I still do trust the universe, why did this happen? And I took that question in and realized that I was so committed fiercely to the cryptocurrency ecosystem. I was involved in Bitcoin since 2013. I've been called a top 25 mind in Bitcoin. I've built 3 companies in the space, and I was known as the heart of crypto. It was a part of my identity. It was a part of who I was. And quite frankly, I had invested so much energy in that space that it was going to take a violent ejection in order for me to leave. And so I'm proud of the work that I've done in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. It's going to continue. It's going to be successful. I think the remaining battles, in cryptocurrency have more to do with regulatory and consumer adoption than technology. And I'm a technologist. So it was also an important, wait, that's right. Why am I here fighting these battles? My energy is much better placed in the AI ecosystem where the battles are, or the challenges are technology related. And so it was also a reassessment for me of where am I actually going to be best served with my zone of genius, and where can I serve best with my zone of genius. And so now I am able to, at first it felt like a Pollyanna exercise of, oh, I'm sure I'll see the light at the end of the tunnel and it'll feel good. And, but I didn't feel an integrity when I was trying to that worldview on. It felt like it was an artificial Pollyanna view. And now,
And I think I just want to jump in real quick before you
yeah,
say "and now." So don't forget what you were going to say next.
yeah.
That is so true. Like in that moment, if someone comes to me or comes to you and says, "Well, can you tell me about the good in this? Can you tell me about um sort of the broader purpose of their design for this?" It's like, I have no idea. And it feels hollow, at least for me, and it doesn't land. And without that sort of, I'm curious to know what you think about this, without that sort of the next couple of acts of the play, even maybe being able to see them, just being in that moment where the first act is kind of wrapped, it doesn't make sense. And it feels incredibly upsetting and disorienting until you get to the next act, which you were about to go to say, "and now," but I'm curious what your thoughts are about that as well.
Yeah, my hippie spiritual friends would bring in the word surrender here, I read the Surrender Experiment, where it talks about following the flow of even if you don't understand what the path is, trust the flow of the energy of the universe. And as much as I want to do that, I consider manifestation one of my superpowers, and so there was this kind of tension there of I had to actually resign to the fact that I didn't know what was coming next. But it bothered me because I usually am in the driver's seat and actively guiding the direction and the vision. And so there was definitely a forced surrender there of, even if you try as hard as you possibly can with this path down the currency angle, it's not going to work. So, accepting that I wasn't in control was a big part of it for me. And then uh, all of the good thoughts started to flow in once I actually had fully sunset the idea of heart rhythm and let go of that vision. And that created the space for what was next. But I remember attempts along the way of trying to accelerate that grieving process, because I wanted to go on to the next thing, and that just wasn't going to work. I actually had to be in the grief and the sunsetting and the release and the surrender before I could properly invite in the next path.
That's really, really powerful and really, really meaningful. Did you learn any strategies or tools that might be helpful to share with the audience about how is it you stay in that moment of grief and sunsetting to really sort of extract the value and meaning out of that moment, despite the fact that I think, our natural human tendency is to want to get the heck out of there. you know?
Mm-hmm.
How was it that you allowed yourself to stay in that moment of discomfort to really extract value and then be able to kind of cleanly or more cleanly move into the next cycle?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind there. One, we did do at Heart Rhythm a very thorough post-mortem of what went wrong, what could we have done different, and one of my other views of the way this world works is that we'll get delivered lessons and we can either choose to learn from them while they're easy, or we can ignore them, and then the pain will be turned up until we listen, and that cycle will be repeated. And so, in the depths of that pain, I had this moment of kind of grab the table and, oh, okay, I really want to learn what I'm meant to learn at this point so that I never have to come back here again. And so it was this big investment on my part of thoroughly look at the preceding 3 years. What were all the different touch points? One example there was, my biggest regret in the company is I'm a technologist, I'm a CTO, and we started the company with the idea that we would hire a CEO, and even had somebody identified and on the cap table and courted him for a long time. He wasn't able to join the company, and when he finally said no, I was already kind of the de facto CEO, and what I should have done was paused the entire effort when he said no and gone out and found the CEO so that I could remain in my zone of genius and be the CTO. And instead, I became kind of I'm a world-class CTO, and if there's a list of the best CTOs in Silicon Valley, I believe I should be on it. But I'm an above average CEO, and so I that's an example of a lesson learned that I went back, and that was only made possible by me consciously deciding to take full inventory of the entire experience with my team, inviting all kinds of critical feedback, going to my advisors, going to my investors, like what should I have done better, and so full inventory of all the and harvesting of all the lessons learned was a big one for me. The second one that comes in is creating space in between. I thankfully, didn't immediately have to go into the next job, because there's lots of work that our subconscious has to do. That as much forward direction as I want to put with my conscious level energy into solving the problem and doing the retrospective analysis, there's a bunch of stuff that just needs to happen at an emotional and subconscious level that you have to create space for and do healing with. So I needed some psychological healing time. And I think those were my two biggest secrets to success for the full and elegant transition out of heart rhythm and into what I'm doing next.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. Mm-hmm. So we're coming to the close of our time together, and I'm curious, Nick, if you would like to sort of update us, fast forward into what all of this has brought you into today. And as we think about sort of the universe having our back and trusting the process, if you'd like to give us a peek into where this tidal wave of change and challenge and complexity has brought you in this present moment and a sense of what you're working on.
Great. Yeah. So with all of my resilience buffers filled back up, I have decided to embark on a company building effort in 2024, a company in the AI space. There's not ready to fully talk about it yet, but it's going to be beautiful. AI with heart seems to be the most important thing that I can work on right now. And I'm excited to tackle some of the direct challenges that people are worried about with AI. Is it going to take us over? Is it going to be built the right way? Is it going to take our jobs? All of those challenges are real. They're here. I see a lot of destructive paths, but I also see a lot of beautiful paths. So I'm putting a lot of my energy right now, and stay tuned for what I'm going to be building and releasing in the AI space. But it's going to be full of heart, full of love, full of resilience, and built the right way.
I'm so excited for what the future holds. And I was thinking while you were talking about, this concept that you and I were sharing before we hit record, and I was talking about just how inspired I've been by the opportunity for people like you, Nick, to be able to share your story of some of the darkest times that you've encountered. And um, we've all faced dark times, some darker than others, right? So you gave us a peek into like one of those dark times in your life and how we get to engage in sort of this human alchemy where we get to take those dark times and by way of doing our own reflection, by way of doing our own healing that you talked about, we actually get to alchemize that darkness and transform it into a light that then becomes a point of encouragement or a spotlight for others that are coming up on the path of challenge behind us to help light their way. And so, as we sort of think about some of your final thoughts here on the episode, I'm curious to know for you, for someone who's in that sort of moment that you've been in, trying to figure out whether to stay or whether to go, whether they persevere and sort of stay the course or kind of fold up their tent and sort of pivot in a significantly new direction. Is there some piece of advice or something that you learned, during this period of time that, has been particularly helpful for you or been sort of a North Star in terms of orientation that you might like to share with our listeners and it might be really specifically helpful to someone who's in that moment?
Hmm. Yeah, going back a little bit in my story, I'd also like to share with everybody that my father died when I was 10 years old, and that was my first big resilience test. And Malcolm Gladwell, in his book The Outliers, talks about how 12 of the first 42 presidents had a parent die at an early age, and he lays out this theory that I agree with, which is when you have something that devastating and that challenging happen to you when you're that young, it's quote the worst thing that can happen to you. And so when you survive the worst thing that can happen to you, you have this kind of view of, well, I've survived that. Now bring it on. Universe, I can handle anything else. And that emboldened confidence of I can handle anything that's been thrown at me was absolutely tremendous in my career across a bunch of different fronts. I've navigated a bunch of other challenges because they paled by comparison. And it's notable that then the only difference between somebody who has had that experience and not is the result of how they decide to transform that into their lives, which is, okay, the universe isn't going to give me anything that I can't handle. And so any challenge that comes my way, it's just my responsibility to figure out how to navigate it, but I've got this.
That's a beautiful message for us to close on. If you're in a space right now where you're wondering if you have what it takes to be able to meet the circumstances of where your life is right now, know that you've got this. And I think there's an easy distance where we say, life doesn't hand you anything that you can't handle. But then when we take a step back and we have an opportunity to really reflect on what's happened, I think we do see that we are incredibly well matched to the challenges that are placed in our path. So thank you for that beautiful, uplifting reminder that we've all got this.
Thank you for all that you are and all that you do. Appreciate you as well, Taryn.
Thank you so much, Nick Sullivan. You were absolutely amazing. And thank you so much for being on the show.
All right.
Well, Nick never ceases to amaze me in the way that he can look at a problem or his experience from multiple different directions. And one of the things I so loved about our conversation is Nick was really able to unpack two seemingly similar circumstances where he felt like the roof got ripped off of the house in terms of the cryptocurrency landscape. And in one of those moments, he decided to stay. And in one of those moments, he decided to go, or I think more akin to his words, he felt forcibly ejected from continuing to do that work. And when I think about the times when I've been forcibly ejected from companies that I've deeply loved, from lines of work that have felt near and dear to my heart, in that moment, it has felt gut-wrenching and terrifying and like a tremendous failure, amazingly embarrassing and shameful. And it is with some time that, like Nick, I too can look back and see that rejection was, as they say, a redirection. And so if you're in a moment of feeling like you're being forcibly ejected from something or rejected from something, whether it's a relationship, a job, an aspiration that you have, what I want you to know is that for everything that I didn't get, no matter how much I wanted it, I can look back at each one of those moments in my life now and say, thank you for setting me free. And what's very clear for Nick today is he would not be in a position to be contributing to AI if he hadn't been set free by the work that he was doing in the cryptocurrency space. Until next time, Flourish or Fold podcast listeners, it's Dr. Taryn Marie, and it's an honor to host you on this podcast. For all of you listening in to Flourish or Fold Stories of Resilience, I want to share with you an online course that we have on our website. We're going to go ahead and drop the website in our show notes, or you can go to www.resilience-leadership.com and check out our offerings. We've got an incredible course for you called Flourish, the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People. So if you love what you're learning about in this podcast, if you love these conversations on resilience, if you love hearing about how you can more effectively face the inevitable moments of challenge, change, and complexity, or the 3 C's as I call them, in your life, then go ahead and check out our online course, Flourish, the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People, because what you are going to find is a one-on-one tutorial with me around each of those 5 practices, as well as an introduction and a conclusion. We've got hours of content that is going to allow you to engage in direct coaching and learning with me on the 5 practices. Go ahead and check it out, and I hope you'll join us in our online course, Flourish, the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People.